In the spring of 1844, Joseph Smith was approached by two boys bearing information regarding an assassination plot being formed against him. The names of the boys were Denison Harris and Robert Scott, and the shocking part of the conspiracy was that it was being led by high-ranking church officials of the time. Shortly thereafter, on June 27, 1844, Joseph and his brother Hyrum were murdered in the Carthage jail. Many commentaries have been formed since that time to attempt to put this tragic episode of American history into perspective. The issue of members of the LDS Church plotting and participating in the murder of their church founder forced church leaders to come to terms that there were many members of the church who were easily led to turn against tenets of the faith and to falter in their testimony of the religion, as well as the prophetic calling of Joseph Smith. In the examination of the following dreams of Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, we can get a sense regarding those who rejected and or sought to discredit the gospel and Joseph Smith, but for some reason they still remained in the church, and we will more fully understand the context of how the revisionist movement gained a foothold in the church and was viewed by church leaders. In the examination of the following dreams of Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, we're going to understand the context of these following dreams, and the viewer should consider the events of the time these dreams were brought to the attention of the church in general. The viewer should consider progression of the revisionist movement from the times of the early church to the present. Is there a need to repent for partaking in the history revision of the LDS Church? And what is a common theme of these dreams? Was there a point to be made in these dreams regarding those who held membership and dwelt with the saints, but were working within to destroy the church? We see a picture here, Mark Hoffman. Many were taken in, and no apologies apparently have been made to our knowledge publicly as to those who partook in this scheme that Mark Hoffman had to rewrite church history to cause everyone to believe a salamander jumped on a rock and instructed Joseph Smith. Is there a need to repent for that, for all those who participated? Or in comparing dreams of Brigham and Joseph, is there a message regarding those who dwell with the saints but did not have a sincere testimony? Here's an excerpt from Brigham Young's talk. By and by, along came some mobocrats, and they greeted them. He's talking about church members greeting the mobocrats and being very friendly. These are men that were part of a conspiracy, and in some ways, and some of them did partake in the murder of Joseph Smith. They were treated like old friends by many in the church. Regarding Joseph Smith, here's a quote from George Q. Cannon. The Lord informed him that he should hold the keys in this life and in the life to come, and they should never be taken from him. George Q. Cannon was saying Joseph Smith never did give up his keys nor his claim on leadership of the church. Many have turned against him in the history of the church since he was alive. Even when he was alive, many saints apostatized. But if we actually knew the fates of those who rejected the truth and betrayed Joseph Smith, we would weep bitter tears for them. A common saying. There's a more famous quote on that. Comparing dreams of Joseph and Brigham. Here we have the Doctrine and Covenants, section 121, verse 16, 17, and 21. This is in regards to those who would turn against Joseph Smith and revise history or otherwise hurt the truth of the Mormon religion. Verse 16, Cursed are all those that shall lift up the heel against mine anointed, saith the Lord, and cry, They have sinned when they have not sinned before me, saith the Lord, but have done that which was meet in mine eyes, which I have commanded them. But those who cry transgression do it because they are servants of sin, and are the children of disobedience themselves. It had been better for them that a millstone had been hanged about their necks, and they drowned in the depth of the sea. Well, here's a dream from March 27th, 1853, by Brigham Young. That's Volume 1, Discourse 14 of the Journal of Discourses. I will tell you a dream that I had last night. I dreamed that I was in the midst of a people who were dressed in rags and tatters. They had turbans upon their heads, and these were also hanging in tatters. The rags were of many colors. And when the people moved, they were all in motion. Their object in this appeared to be to attract attention. Said they to me, "We are Mormons, Brother Brigham." "No, you are not," I replied. "But we have been," said they, and they began to jump and caper about and dance, and their rags of many colors were all in motion to attract the attention of the people. I said, "You are no saints. You are a disgrace to them." Said they, "We have been Mormons." By and by, along came some autocrats, and they greeted them with, "How do you do, sir? I'm happy to see you." They kept on that way for about an hour. The original group of settlers in Salt Lake Valley passed down significant knowledge to their children. So we'll come back to the dream in just a moment. And this is people that actually understood and knew these leaders at the time. They passed these things directly to their grandchildren. For those who directly benefited of being taught this knowledge from those who were recipients of the first-hand accounts, untainted by history revisionists, this knowledge is priceless. There are still living people who are just one generation removed from the oral history passed down from the mid-19th century. And what this means is that there are still those alive with direct connections to oral history of the early church. That one generation later would have been the grandchildren, children of these men that were the first settlers. They would have passed that one generation further, and there's still many people who have a direct connection to that, having a second-hand account. The stark contradiction between those who had a direct connection and today's history revisionists is quite significant. And the revisions are not even remotely close to the correct facts in their investigations and reconstructions of, quote, what must have been in the days of the early church. And Brigham Young continues in his dream. I felt ashamed of them, for they were in my eyes a disgrace to Mormonism. Then I saw two ruffians, whom I knew to be mobbers and murderers, and they crept into a bed where one of my wives and children were. I said, "You that call yourselves brethren, tell me, is this the fashion among you?" They said, "Oh, they are good men. They are gentlemen." And here's the posted dream of Brigham Young, concluding the last paragraph. You may want to pause and read the rest of it, but he ended the dream with, "Now you nasty apostates, clear out, or judgment will be put to the lion and righteousness to the plummet." Voices generally in his dream said, "Go it, go it. If you say it is right, raise your hands." All hands up. Let us call upon the Lord to assist us in this and every good work. That was the words he spoke to the congregation as he reported his dream. Now, it's a significant dream. Yes, he has some subliminal things that came out in the dream. Of course, he wouldn't have committed these actions in real life. This is a dream where he felt he was taking care of the images and the people, basically defending the Mormons from these kind of apostates entering into it. He uses the bosom pin, so it's just a symbolic use of that pin as it becomes a larger Bowie knife. Joseph Smith's Mulholland Street dream, riding up Mulholland Street. Joseph Smith Jr., related by Miles Romney. Now, Miles Romney reported hearing Joseph Smith relate this dream, and it is written in Joseph's voice. Romney's text here has some correction that I have added to spelling and grammar. It's hard to find a good script of this because of the numerous errors. So there may be a few other versions of this, and this is corrected so it can be read without having to stop and figure out, why it has various pronouns and combined at the same time. Mistakes grammatically is what I'm referring to. Joseph Smith was riding out by the temple in his carriage. We had not gone far with my guardian angel along with me, which was always the case. We had not gone far before we spied 2 large snakes so fast locked together that neither of them had power. I then inquired of my guide what they meant. He answered, the snakes that you see represent Dr. Foster and Chauncey Higby, and they are your enemies and desire to destroy you. But you see, they are so fast locked together that they have no power and can do you no harm. I then dreamt again that I was riding up Mulholland Street in Nauvoo, Illinois. But I had not my conductor along with me, as was the case before this time. When I came to the edge of the prairie, who should I see approaching but William and Wilson Law, saying, "Ah, ah, ah! Now we have got you at last, and we will secure you and put you in a safe place." And without any ceremony they dragged me out of my carriage and led me to the edge of the wood, where they had prepared a deep pit for the purpose. They put me down into it, and then turned and went away. They had not been gone long when I heard them calling with all their might, "Joseph, Joseph, Joseph, come to our help." I replied, "You have put me into this deep pit, and I cannot get out." I then made a spring, and I caught hold of the grass which was growing at the edge of the pit with my fingers, and pulled myself up. As I could see on the prairie and at a little distance, I there beheld that a large snake had twisted itself around Wilson Law and grabbed him by the arm, a little above the elbow, and was fast strangling him. A little further I saw a great bear that had laid hold of William Law and was tearing him to pieces. At this time I heard my name called. "Joseph, Joseph, what in goodness are you doing here?" I looked up, and I saw my guardian angel coming, bounding over the fence. I said my enemies had put me there. He said, "Take hold of my hand." I did, so he jerked me out of the pit and said, "Follow me." And he led me off in an opposite direction. I then awoke. What is the symbolism of the events in this dream? If we know who William Law is, we know he was called of the Lord in 1841, specifically mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 124.91, to serve as Joseph Smith's second counselor in the first presidency. Later, he turned against the prophet and published the Nauvoo Expositor with his brother Wilson and others. So if we were to speculate how the devil would put his plan together, and we're talking about the dreams of Joseph and Brigham Young, and we're going to speculate how the devil would put his plan together to overthrow the LDS Church, what would it look like, and how would he accomplish this? So here's just a mock write-up of a plan made by the devil. Number 1, seek to discredit and or both kill Joseph Smith. The discrediting part can go on long after he's been killed. Number 2, make it unpleasant to be a member of the Mormon Church. Harass, persecute, even injure or kill Latter-day Saints men, women, and children. As an example, look at the Missouri persecutions, the Missouri Extermination Order, which lasted until 1976, made it legal to murder Mormons. Number 3, create factions of so-called disaffected Mormons within the church itself. For example, William Law's quote, well, it's a true church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was the name of this offshoot he tried to form. It was short-lived. So William Law actually had a testimony of the Book of Mormon, even as he conspired and helped create the plot to murder Joseph Smith. Number 4, Satan would infiltrate membership of the church, continuing this role to revise history and teachings. Number 5, mainstreaming of common myths against Joseph Smith by repurposing and making Joseph Smith out as an ordinary, flawed, and sinful man like everyone else. Those who are part of the devil's plan can create a false perception that Joseph Smith is close to being on the level of everyone else. From the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, to put a little perspective here to clear up, when we talk about the dreams, we also want to make sure we emphasize the character of Joseph Smith. Brother Joseph Smith said, "We have assembled together to do the business of the Lord, and it is through the great mercy of our God that we are spared to assemble together. Many of us have gone at the command of the Lord in defiance of everything evil and obtained blessings unspeakable." The evil was almost unimaginable that Joseph Smith faced from the raging powers of hell. Perfect love is a safeguard against falling from grace. The message of Joseph Smith was a perfect love for fellow human beings and souls. He said that he intended to do his duty before the Lord and hoped that the brethren would be patient, as they had a considerable distance to go, and also said that the promise of God was that the greatest blessings which God had to bestow should be given to those who contributed to the support of his family while he was translating the fullness of the Scriptures. Until we have a perfect love, we are liable to fall, and when we have a testimony that our names are sealed in the Lamb's Book of Life, we have perfect love, and then it is impossible for false Christs to deceive us. Also said that the Lord held the church bound to provide for families of the absent elders while proclaiming the gospel. Further, that God had often sealed up the heavens because of covetousness in the church. The Lord would cut short his work in righteousness, and except the church receive the fullness of the Scriptures, that they would yet fail. I'm talking about not being fooled by false Christ. If you perfect this safeguard, which is referenced here as perfect love, that is how you avoid falling from grace. Brother Joseph Smith said, "We have assembled together to do the business of the Lord, and it is through the great mercy of our God that we are spared to assemble together, and many of us have gone at the command of the Lord in defiance of everything evil, and obtained blessings unspeakable, in consequence of which our names are sealed in the Lamb's Book of Life. For the Lord has spoken it. It is the privilege of every elder to speak of the things of God, and could we all come together with one heart and one mind in perfect faith, the veil might as well be rent today as next week or any other time. And if we will but cleanse ourselves in covenant before God to serve him, it is our privilege to have an assurance that God will protect us at all times." Here we have a picture of a noted revisionist in modern era. A lot of people that participated with this man in changing the history of the church to revolve around a salamander jumping on a rock and instructing Joseph Smith. It's probably got a lot of significance even now, as we are not hearing any real apology from those who are experts that participated in this attempt to revise history. And so what exactly are these dreams referencing regarding apostates? What was their point to be made regarding those who dwelt with the saints but did not have a sincere testimony? And what is a common theme of these dreams? What is a full history of this revisionism taking place in the church that seemed to have started back when Joseph Smith was alive? It was something he and subsequent church leaders combated and contested against throughout the history of the church. You saw what Brigham Young said, trying to be as forceful as he could to denounce those who were part of the murderous mobs that murdered Joseph Smith, and expressing his bewilderment as to why many in the church befriended and treated them as they were royalty. There are many here that have been in the church for 15, 16, and some more than 20 years. I have been in the church wanting a few days of 21 years, and there are a considerable number that I know have been in it longer than I have. They knew Joseph. They knew him from week to week and from year to year, and they knew what he did. They knew how he spake. They knew the spirit he possessed. They were acquainted with it. It is the same spirit they possess to the present day, the spirit of Mormonism, the spirit of the gospel, the spirit of Mormonism. I will ask those brethren and those sisters if they believe Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, if they believe that he magnified his calling. I will ask them if Joseph lived and died a prophet of God, and what would they answer? All men and women know, by the power of the Holy Ghost, by the Spirit they know it, by the light that is in them, for light cleaveth to light, and truth embraces truth. These pure attributes, as I told you here a few Sabbaths ago, stand upon their own basis. The fabric sustains itself, but falsehood, and that which is built upon it, will, sooner or later, fall. Much of the works of men like William Law, as you can see, they did have an effect on the church, but ultimately those kind of men were discredited, as they will be throughout the history of the church. How many witnesses could we bring? Men that are upon the islands of the sea, in foreign lands, and people scattered through the United States, hundreds and thousands in their poverty, who are not able to gather with the saints. I ask, what would they witness if they were here today? They would tell you, and they would sound it so that all the world might hear, if they could, that Joseph Smith was a man called of God to build up his kingdom in the last days, preparatory to the coming of the Son of Man. There are many witnesses here, not only witnesses of Joseph in his career, but witnesses of the disaffected spirits that have come into this church and have gone out again. Are there witnesses of men trying to rise up and usurp Joseph's place in his day? Yes. There are many witnesses that many men tried it. Are there witnesses here of the rise and fall of men in this kingdom? Yes, plenty of them. I have witnessed more than has been pleasing to me. It delights me to see men come into the church and magnify the holy priesthood. But it is a grievous matter to see men turn away from the holy commandments delivered unto them, gather to themselves false spirits, follow after a phantom, and be duped by the devil, be ensnared by the power of the enemy, and give way to it until they fall. It is a source of regret, but we witness it. We could name many of this class. Let me ask this congregation, that portion of it that was in Jackson County, and again that portion of that was in Kirtland in the days of Joseph, and in leaving Kirtland, then those that were in Caldwell and Davis counties, Missouri. Then ask these who were in Nauvoo in this day, and after he was slain, these portions of my congregation which I have mentioned, I will ask, what has produced your persecutions and sorrow? What has been the starting point of all your afflictions? They began with the apostates in your midst, those history revisionists, for example. These disaffected spirits causing others to come in, worse than they, who would run out and bring in all the devils they possibly could. That has been the starting point and grand cause of our difficulties. Every time we were driven. Are there not witnesses of this here? Yes, a good portion of this congregation are witnesses of these things, although many of them never saw Joseph and were not personally acquainted with him. We have been persecuted. We have built houses, made farms, cultivated the land, broken up the wild prairie, and made it like the Garden of Eden. We have fenced, built, and gathered substance around us many times, and as many times have been driven from our possessions until we came to this inheritance which we now enjoy in these valleys of the mountains. Now think a moment, reflect, and ask yourselves, what do we see here? I am coming nearer home. I am coming to this place. What do we see here? Do we see disaffected spirits here? We do. Do we see apostates? We do. Do we see men that are following after false and delusive spirits? Yes. When a man comes right out as an independent devil and says, damn Mormonism and all the Mormons, and is off with himself, not to Texas, but to California. You know, it used to be to Texas. I say he's a gentleman, by the side of a nasty, sneaking apostate who was opposed to nothing but Christianity. I say to the former, go in peace, sir. Go and prosper if you can. But we have got a set of spirits here worse than such a character. When I went for meeting last Sabbath, my ears were saluted with an apostate, crying in the streets here. I want to know if any of you who has got the spirit of Mormonism in you, spirit that Joseph and Hyrum had, or that we have here, would say, let us hear both sides of the question. Let us listen and prove all things. What do you want to prove? Do you want to prove that an old apostate who has been cut off from the church 13 times for lying is anything worthy of notice? I heard that a certain gentleman, a picture maker in this city, when the boys would have moved away, the wagon in which this apostate was standing, became violent with them, saying, let this man alone. These are saints that are persecuting, sneeringly. We want such men to go to California or anywhere they choose. I say to those persons, you must not court persecution here, lest you get so much of it you will not know what to do with it. And of course, that's clear. The man in the wagon he's referencing is talking about being persecuted himself as he harasses the saints. Romans 11:24. So for those apostates, this is a great message for them. If you are listening, it's a message for all apostates. Boast not against the branches, for thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. The natural branches take heed, he also not spare thee, lest he also not spare thee. Your hatred and mockery. Okay, this is just one comment here. Your hatred and mockery of those who have steadfastly remained loyal to Joseph Smith has not gone unnoticed. That was added. For I speak unto you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle of the Gentiles. This is Romans 11:13 and 24. I magnify mine office, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them is the reconciling of the world, what shall the restoring of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, was grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches, for thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. The root bearest thee, you do not bear the root. For if thou boast, thou wilt say, the branches were broken off, that we might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. And so, to wrap this up for those who are in the church and seek to discard what still represents the roots of the religion, for if God spare not the natural branches, take heed, lest he also not spare thee. This concludes this presentation. Please like and subscribe.